Or not to be. Right. We're looking at Shakespeare's Hamlet, and I think we're a little bit going to have our time curtailed because of the performances, so I need to move a little bit more quickly than I would like through Hamlet, but let's get to it then. We left off just with Act 1, Scene 1, setting the stage, as it were, and noted that the sort of the outer frame narrative of this tragedy is that the Prince of Denmark, who is Hamlet, his father has died, but before he died, he had conquered Norway and thereby bereft a young prince by the name of Fortinbras, not only of his father, but of his inheritance. So Fortinbras is a foil for Hamlet, is what we're going to find out. So Hamlet has lost his father, Fortinbras has lost his father, but Hamlet's father took Fortinbras's father's life, and with it his land. So now it all belongs to Claudius, and Fortinbras is angry and he wants vengeance. And he is now threatening Denmark. That's how the whole play begins. It's also how the play is going to end. Fortinbras is going to come in at the end. So that's why it's the frame narrative, and usually people miss that. Because it's so seemingly peripheral to the play. But that's how the play begins, with them on a watch, and it ends with Fortinbras coming in and cleaning up. And so the play will end on a note of order, a restoration of order, by a young prince who acts to revenge the injustice done to him. And that's what the play is about with Hamlet as well. So because he is, as I just said, a foil for Fortinbras, but the difference between the two of them is that Fortinbras, strong in arms, is a man of action, whereas Hamlet is a contemplative sort who's not capable of action, seemingly. And the play is about a man who never really gets going until it's too late. And in order to act, he seems to have to be able to get to the bottom of things and make clear in his own mind what he's to do. And we talked a bit about why that was the case, but we'll dig into it a bit more now. I want to move to Scene 2 of Act 2 because we've not yet met some of the main characters. So King Claudius presented Claudius, King of Denmark, Gertrude, the Queen, and then there's a council, and then Polonius, his son Laertes, Hamlet is also there, and then a few others. Let's begin with the king's speech. The king's speech is written in very orderly verse, you'll note, and suggests the commanding presence of the king by speaking in such tones. It's what you would expect of a king, actually. But I'll just read some of the lines and then we'll comment on them. Though yet of Hamlet our dear brother's death the memory be green, and that it is us befitted to bear our hearts in grief, and our whole kingdom to be contracted in one brow of woe. Yet so far hath discretion fought with nature, that we with wisest sorrow think on him together with remembrance of ourselves. Therefore our sometime sister, now our queen, the imperial jointress to this warlike state, have we, as 'twere with a defeated joy, with an auspicious and a dropping eye, with mirth in funeral and with dirge in marriage, in equal scale weighing delight and dole, taken to wife. Nor have we herein barred your better wisdoms, which have freely gone with this affair along. For all our thanks. Now follows that you know young Fortinbras, holding a weak supposal of our worth, or thinking by our late dear brother's death our state to be disjoint and out of frame, co-leagued with his dream of his advantage, he hath not failed to pester us with message importing the surrender of those lands lost by his father, with all bands of law, to our most valiant brother. So much for him. Now for ourself, and for this time of meeting, thus much the business is. We have here writ to Norway, uncle of young Fortinbras, who, impotent and bedrid rather, scarcely hears of this his nephew's purpose, to suppress his further date herein, in that the levies, the lists, and full proportions are all made out of his subject. And we here dispatch you, good Cornelius, and you, Voltimand, for bearers of this greeting to old Norway, giving to you no further personal power to business with the king, more than the scope of these dilated articles allow. Hands over the paper. Farewell, and let your haste commend your duty. In that and all things, the two men say, we will show our duty. And then out they go. And then the king. And now, Laertes, what's the news with you? You told us of some suit. What is it, Laertes? You cannot speak of reason to the Dane and lose your voice. What wouldst thou beg, Laertes? That shall not be my offer, not thy asking. The head is not more native to the heart, the hand more instrumental to the mouth, than is the throne of Denmark to thy father. What wouldst thou have, Laertes? So he's come to pay suit as in to be a suitor to the king and ask for some favor. So he's come with that, and his father is the king's main counselor, Polonius. And here's the young son, who's another young man just like Hamlet and like Fortinbras and like Horatio. There are 4 young men in this play, and all are very interesting characters in their own right. But Laertes introduced here. My dread lord, your leave and favor to return to France, from whence, though willingly I came to Denmark to show my duty in your coronation, yet now I must confess, that duty done, my thoughts and wishes bend again toward France, and bow them to your gracious leave and pardon. Have you your father's leave? What says Polonius? Hath, my lord, wrung from me my slow leave by laboursome petition, and at last upon his will I sealed my hard consent. I do beseech you, give him leave to go. Take thy fair hour, Laertes, time be thine, and thy best graces spend it at thy will. But now, my cousin Hamlet and my son, and then Hamlet, a little more than kin and less than kind. Okay. How is it that the clouds still hang on you? So, first words from Hamlet's mouth. A little more than kin, and it's an aside. It's to the audience, so we're disclosed this is what he's thinking. A little more than kin and less than kind. So he is unhappy, to put it mildly. And there may be more than that. Again, the suggestion of it, he's kindred, as the king has just said, but there's and less than kind, more in the sense that we speak of kindness. He's not inclined favorably towards his uncle / now stepfather for some reason. One reason might have already been given. His father has just died, and his mother has almost instantly remarried her father's brother. That doesn't go over very well. She's still not long in the. He's still not long in the grave. And a little later on, when he upbraids his mother, he'll say, "Mother, the funeral baked meats did coldly furnish forth the marriage feast." You know, you took the food from the funeral and you just moved it over to the wedding banquet because it followed. You didn't even have to bring in new food. That's how unseemly hasty it was, the marriage. So anything like that would upset anyone. But there's more than that here. But the king, how is it that the clouds still hang on you? Not so, my lord, I am too much in the sun. Good Hamlet, says the queen mother, cast thy nighted colour off, and let thine eye look like a friend on Denmark. Do not forever with thy veiled lids seek for thy noble father in the dust. Thou knowest 'tis common. All that lives must die, passing through nature to eternity. Aye, madam, it is common. If it be, why seems it so particular with thee? Seems, madam, nay, it is, I know not seems. 'Tis not alone my inky cloak, good mother, nor customary suits of solemn black, nor windy suspiration of forced breath, no, nor the fruitful river in the eye, nor the dejected haviour of the visage, together with all the forms, moods, shapes of grief that can denote me truly. These indeed seem, for they are actions that a man might play, but I have that within which passes show. These but the trappings and the suits of woe. So he talks about how these things are signs of grief. So you're wearing a black at funerals. One customarily wears black as a sign of mourning, and makes sighs as a sign of mourning. There's like they signposts that point to it, or the rivers in the eyes, the tears, or the downcast face. These are signs of grief, but these things are merely seeming they're outward appearances. There's something beneath that, and this shows us that Hamlet. Two things about Hamlet. One is that he's a thoughtful fellow, and he looks beneath the appearances of things. Just by disposition, he doesn't trust what he sees with his own eyes. He's a skeptic, and the reason for his skepticism and his disillusionment is because his own nature has been broken in the loss of his father, and his place in the world with it. One, he misses his dad. That's only part of it. If it were only that. Remember, the king in Shakespeare's understanding has two bodies. The king's own body, which has clearly died now, and yet he also had a place in the world. He was the king, and as the prince, he had a social and political function in relation to his father. He was going to be the heir to the throne. Where is he now? Now that his uncle has succeeded him to the throne, what happens to Hamlet? Hamlet is a threat to his father, actually, because there's a question of legitimacy. I don't know what the practices are in Denmark, but I would have thought an adult son would have a very good claim upon the throne. And yet we have the acknowledged king of Denmark here, and it's as if there were no problems. Well, he's not willing to announce that he ought to be the king, because then there would be a straight out fight at that point. I assume that Hamlet's not in a position to fight that fight for whatever political reasons or otherwise. But on the other hand, he's not willing to let it lie, and in part because what role will he have here? And he doesn't know what role to play. And then from thence comes one of the great themes of this play, which is acting. How should one act if one does not have a legitimate role? Because now he's effectively illegitimate. Right? He's still the adopted son of Claudius because of the mother. But on the other hand, does he accept his uncle's legitimate rule? That's the question. And the queen and the king look upon this rather differently. She thinks there's no problem with it. She says this is the common way of things. All that lives must die, passing through nature to eternity. No more thought to it. Hamlet says, "Aye, madam, it is common." What does he mean by the word common here? Debased. Common as in it happens every day, but she says, no, this is so there's a play on words. Hamlet's constantly playing on words. So when she says it seems like this, and he says, yes, there's the seeming, the appearance, and then there's the reality. So that disjuncture, which he starts off here, he will play throughout the play. So there's an act on the stage, there's an action going on, which is a drama, which is of course a fiction, but is the fiction displaying something that's real? And this is Shakespeare's great theme for this play. Yes?
What always perplexes me as a student of history is the fact that Hamlet is not in another country, on a political asylum, trying to raise support to say, hey, I'm supposed to be king, not my uncle. And the fact that he's
Yeah, so I don't know the rules of succession in Denmark.
Not dead.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't make any sense either. It's like in Macbeth, how Macbeth sees the throne and all of that happens, but he has no heir.
Right.
Claudius doesn't kill, he kills King, but he doesn't kill Hamlet.
He doesn't, but it's because he loves his mother, and he doesn't want to alienate her. So that's his dilemma. He needs to act, and he also must seem to love his adopted son now, his nephew.
Him to England too.
Right, so he needs to take care of him, but he can't do it overtly without alienating the mother whom he loves and wants to be. So he wants the whole picture. He didn't just want Denmark, he wanted his brother's wife to be faithful to him and happy with him, and he can't do that by just getting rid of Hamlet. So there are mixed motives here. Both men are more politically astute than the mother. Gertrude seems at first very naive about the situation. Well, he's just died. Both Hamlet and Claudius are aware that there's more than familial relations at work here. There are political stations and so forth. They're both aware of that. And he sees Hamlet as a threat right at the outset, whereas the mother's just, oh, you're so upset. You know, why are you so sad? And whereas Claudius, you're troubled, and I'm troubled by the fact that you're troubled because you're a threat to me. How am I going to deal with you? One way or the other, I think he will resolve to get rid of him. Even if he's not opposed to him, I think he has to get rid of him because his legitimacy is in question as long as he's alive. But we don't get to that point. Yes, again.
Sorry, I'm reading something right now that's saying that Claudius is, his whole character is loosely based off the Roman Emperor Claudius.
Yeah, maybe.
So, married, who had an incestuous marriage
Yeah.
with Agrippina the Younger.
Sure.
The name is based off of him.
Yep.
He's the archetypal, evil, classical ruler.
Fair enough.
Shakespearean would have related to.
Yep. But fair enough. It doesn't add much, but it's true. It's true of Claudius, but I mean, and that may be what Shakespeare has in mind in drawing up the character of Claudius here. Sure.
But Claudius isn't necessarily evil.
Well, he's killed his brother and and taken the kingdom by.
Claudius says, "Oh, my offense is rank; it smells to heaven."
Right.
And a guard says something rotten in the state of Denmark.
No, he's a very evil character, actually.
He compares himself to Cain.
Yeah. There's no way of not seeing Claudius as an evil figure. But he does not at the outset. He appears to be a very virtuous, good man. But that's the point. Hamlet doesn't trust the appearance here. The state of reality, and it's not just the state of reality, it's the state of public perception and political correctness. To be politically correct in Denmark is to agree that everything's okay. The king is dead, long live the king. That's politically correct. And we all have to agree with that. And in fact, because the monarch has such power and authority, we will agree to that. Right? And the king, for there to be order in the kingdom, the legitimacy of the king needs to be acknowledged by all. Otherwise, there's dissension in the ranks, and that there's the recipe for a civil war. And that's even more troubled by the fact that, again, Fortinbras is lurking on the outside and threatening the kingdom, so they can't have divisions within the ranks. They have to be unified. And people are probably willing to back Claudius and not open the question of whether Hamlet may in fact be the legitimate heir because there's a threat of invasion. So there's a united front. And if he were done away with, maybe we can open this question.
There's never not a king as soon as the old king dies.
No, there is a king, that's right. There has to be a king. Or if there isn't, then again, there's an immediate civil war. Yeah. And again, that's what I said with Henry VIII, and this would be in Shakespeare's mind. His great fear was that he would leave his England without an heir. And then war breaks out amongst the nobility. Like, who will claim this? None has a legitimate claim. And unless there's an undeniable legitimacy there will be conflict. Has to be. So, but that's all been put to one side because of the political threat, the military threat of Fortinbras. And so that may be also what's checking Hamlet, is that threat of war. People have been willing to back the strong horse just because of that. Why is that? That's as good a reason as I can come up with. Yes?
Another unnatural thing actually is in fact that Norway will be invading Denmark.
Yes.
During most of history, Denmark was Norway's superior in every way.
Right. And Sweden usually over both of them, right? So.
But even like the Kalmar Union, Denmark leads Norway and Sweden under a personal union, leading them both with their king over the other two.
Yeah.
So like everything is unnatural, everything is thrown out of balance.
Correct. So the king's response to all this, that he has within which passes show. There's a depth to his sorrow which goes beneath these signposts that are the normal indicators of grief. And but the trappings and the suits of woe, but there's something beneath the clothing of that which suggests my deep malaise. So he is in a state of revolt against his outward appearance even. He is very disturbed. And we're going to find when he comes to his first soliloquy at the end of this scene, he is revolting against his own flesh. He doesn't know how to act. But the king's response to this is very courteous and courtly, and he wants to, again, put on a good face to his new wife. "'Tis sweet and commendable in your nature, Hamlet, to give these mourning duties to your father. But you must know your father lost a father. That father lost his, and the survivor bound in filial obligation for some term to do obsequious sorrow. But to persevere in obstinate condolement is a course of impious stubbornness. 'Tis unmanly grief. It shows a will most incorrect to heaven, a heart unfortified, or mind impatient, and understanding simple and unschooled. For what we know must be, and is as common as any, the most vulgar thing to sense. Why should we in our peevish opposition take it to heart? Fie, 'tis a fault to heaven, a fault against the dead, a fault to nature, to reason most absurd, whose common theme is death of fathers, and who still hath cried from the first corpse till he that died today. This must be so. We pray you throw to earth this unprevailing woe, and think of us as of a father. For let the world take note, you are the most immediate to our throne, and with no less nobility of love than that which dearest father bears his son, do I impart toward you. For your intent is going back to school in Wittenberg." So Laertes has just gone off back to France because he's in school there, whatever. This young man, Hamlet, wants to go back to Wittenberg. It is most retrograde to our desire. He doesn't want him to go. Laertes may, Hamlet may not. "And we beseech you, bend you to remain here in the cheer and comfort of our eye, our chiefest courtier, cousin, and our son." So why does he not want him to go? He just let Laertes go. Why not Hamlet? If you think of it in terms of power politics, you want to keep your enemies close. If he leaves and goes to Wittenberg, allies can arise, and then he can be like another Fortinbras. I'm going to keep you right where I can keep my eye on you. But that's not the reason he gives. And he appeals the king to an order within nature. What's the order within nature? Well, it's the orders of the faculties of the mind. So your reason should rule as a viceroy over your passions. Exercise through the will. The reason should inform your will to govern your passions. Of course, you're sad that your father has died. But that's the way of all flesh. Men die. Your father has died, he has died, and so forth. It's not wrong to have sorrow because of the loss, but it is wrong not to govern your passions. And so he's giving him a lesson. He's instructing him on how he ought to be a man. And so there's a great irony here. He's acting as a moral authority, giving the general counsel that Shakespeare's audience would agree to, and Hamlet himself would agree to. And all of that is valid advice and good advice, if there is a legitimate loss of a father and he has not been murdered. But that's the whole point, is I think Hamlet suspects even at the outset that something is amiss, even before he sees his father's ghost. But this is me reading into it, but I think there's warrant in the text to suggest that Hamlet, in his line, a little more than kin and less than kind, he's not just I don't like him. I don't like my father's brother. There's more than that there. And that's certain when he does see the ghost, he says, I knew it. I knew it. So, and then the queen adds to this, let not thy mother lose her prayers, Hamlet. I pray thee stay with us, go not to Wittenberg. I shall in all my best obey you, madam. Why, 'tis a loving and fair reply. Be as ourself in Denmark. Madam, come, etc. Now, when they all leave, here's Hamlet's speech. His first soliloquy, and this is a play famous for soliloquies, and Hamlet chiefly. Now, when a soliloquy is acted on a play, the player walks to the front of the stage, right front and center, addresses the audience. He's not addressing another character, he's addressing the audience, but it's as if the audience isn't there. Remember that rarely in Shakespeare's day do they break through the fourth wall, the wall between the audience and the stage. They occasionally do. They will speak of us and acknowledge that there's an audience, but this is as if he's speaking into blank space, as if he's thinking. So his first soliloquy, oh, that this too sallied flesh would melt, thaw and resolve itself into a dew, or that the everlasting had not fixed his cannon against self-slaughter. He wants to take his own life. O God, God, how weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seems to me all the uses of this world. Fie on it. Ah, fie, 'tis an unweeded garden. That metaphor that we've seen over and over and over. It's an unweeded garden that grows to seed. Things rank and gross in nature possess it merely. That it should come to this, but 2 months dead, nay, not so much, not 2, so excellent a king, that was to this Hyperion to a satyr, so loving to my mother, that he might not beteem the winds of heaven, visit her face too roughly. He was so compassionate for his mother that he would upbraid the winds for making her cheek lose its complexion. Heaven and earth, must I remember why she would hang on him as if increase of appetite had grown by what it fed on, and yet within a month, let me not think on it. Frailty thy name is woman. A little month, or ere those shoes were old, with which she followed my poor father's body, like Niobe, all tears. Why, even she, O God, a beast that wants discourse of reason, would have mourned longer. Married with my uncle, my father's brother, but no more like my father than I to Hercules. Within a month, ere yet the salt of most unrighteous tears had left the flushing in her galled eyes, she married. O most wicked speed, to post with such dexterity to incestuous sheets, it is not, nor it cannot come to good, but break my heart, for I must hold my tongue. So this is what is within him. He dare not utter this, because in the end, even in the incestuous sheets, this is my father's brother. Now, Shakespeare's audience will be aware that King Henry VIII married his brother's wife, his first wife, Catherine. And he claimed when she was barren that he was being punished because this was incest, even though he got dispensation to marry her from the church. And that probably in the audience's mind, they're like, are you allowed to do this? Well, in Scripture, you are actually commanded to do so. And that would have been the grounds on which Henry appealed at first. I should do this and bring him in error, etc., etc. But then in retrospect, he thinks maybe I ought not to have done that. But anyway, those sort of thoughts are in the minds of, and it's all about legitimacy. Again, because again, in Shakespeare's world, there isn't just order, there's a lawful order. It's a legitimate order. It's not just a social contract. Don't think of Rousseau and the consent of the governed and all that. That's not the issue here. The issue is, does God ordain it? And does it follow a moral rule, and does it follow the law of nature? That's the issue. And Hamlet is so distraught that he even would take his own life if he did not fear the wrath of God. But he does. And that's also important here. So he recognizes that there is a rule and a legitimacy, even if in the kingdom and in this life it seems like the world has gone to seed, just like the garden that's not weeded. Still, God reigns and rules, and he must not do the thing that he would like to do, which is just to take his own life at that point. But Horatio enters, and I'm going to skip over this to some degree, but Horatio tells him that he's seen a ghost, and it looked like your dad. And you can only imagine after this speech and after what he's just said, how is he going to respond to this? And one of the things that's interesting about Hamlet is he's aware of his own proclivity to be irrational at this point. He isn't irrational. This is a highly rational speech. He's in control of himself publicly, but even privately when he's speaking the speech, it's not an irrational speech. He's just upset. Right? So, and being in the throes of the passions, it's not a contrast between being reasonable and irrational. The passions are not the forces of irrationality, but if you listen to the passions, you're acting irrationally. But you can't be rational by having no passions. That's not a possibility. You wouldn't be human. To be human is not to be like Mr. Spock, right? And it dictates of reason. You feel nothing moves you. That's not the case. You have the passions, and they ought to be involved in your moral governance. And he is governed by his reason nonetheless, even at the end of the speech. But Horatio comes in and tells him that his father's ghost has been sighted, and Hamlet tells him, take me there. I want to see this for myself. Now, in the third scene, and I'm moving a little bit swiftly on here, Laertes and Ophelia, the two together, enter. And I need to get into this a little bit. At the beginning, there are all sorts of personal relationships which are established, which we need to understand, and they're important because later on they will explain characters' motivation. So Laertes is going to be, although he wants to go back to France, is so outraged by his sister that he's going to come back and avenge and want Hamlet's blood. Right? He's ready and hot for vengeance. It's because he loves his sister so. And that is revealed here. Otherwise, it doesn't really, it's not that it's implausible that a brother would be upset if his sister dies or is betrayed by a suitor. But this gives a little bit of dramatic plausibility to it. So Laertes and Ophelia, his sister, Laertes, who's off to France, my necessaries are embarked. Embarked, a bark is a boat. It's a poetic verb for the bark. The bark's the outside covering. It's a wooden boat. It's embarked. They're in the boat, and he's ready to sail. My necessaries are embarked. Farewell. And sister, as the winds give benefit and convey, is assistant. Do not sleep, but let me hear from you. So he's sad to leave his sister. Don't, write me. Right away. Ophelia, do you doubt that? For Hamlet, and the trifling of his favor, hold it a fashion and a toy in blood, a violet in the youth of primy nature, forward, not permanent, sweet, not lasting, the perfume and suppliance of a minute, no more. Okay, what's going on here? The violet, a violet is a fixed symbol in Elizabethan symbolism for passion, as in romantic passion. So it's a violet, sexual attraction. So he thinks you're hot. Don't think that means he means anything more than that. Do not be persuaded that there's anything more than that. Yes, Hamlet finds you attractive, but do not allow yourself to think that means anything more than a temporary thing that will flame out and that will be the end of it. So that's the brother's advice. He knows as a young man what other young men are like, and Hamlet has Hamlet is not allowed to marry whoever he wants. He's the prince. He has to marry who the king wants him to marry politically. It will be expedient. You might be Polonius's daughter, and Polonius the favorite, but that doesn't mean that he's going to marry he'll probably marry some other. That would be the most likely outcome, by the way, other than Hamlet being killed, is he'd be married off to some other king or queen, and they ship him out, get him out of here. And her response, no more, but so, think it no more. For nature, crescent does not grow alone in thews and bulk, but as this temple waxes, the inward service of the mind and soul grows wide withal. Perhaps he loves you now. And now no soil nor caudle doth besmirch the virtue of his will. But you must fear his greatness weighed, his will is not his own. For he himself is subject to his birth. He may not, as unvalued persons do, carve for himself. For on his choice depends the safety and the health of this whole state. And therefore must his choice be circumscribed unto the voice and yielding of that body whereof he is the head. King's two bodies, right? He will have to serve the body. It's not, cannot follow his own will. He's not just any man. This is the future king of Denmark, potentially. And as long as that is so, the state will have a voice in who he marries. Then if he says he loves you, it fits your wisdom so far to believe it as he in his particular act and place may give his saying deed, which is no further than the main voice of Denmark goes withal. Then weigh what loss your honor may sustain if with too credent ear you list his songs, or lose your heart, or your chaste treasure open to his unmastered importunity. I think you know what that means. Fear it, Ophelia, fear it, my dear sister, and keep you in the rear of your affection. Keep you in the rear of it. So affectionately, you stay back here. Don't give your heart to him. Out of the shot and danger of desire. The chariest mage is prodigal enough if she unmask her beauty to the moon. Virtue itself scapes not calumnious strokes. The canker galls the infants of the spring. So be careful also, because your reputation is at risk here. Right? If you are too obviously allied to Hamlet in the public eye, there will be suggestions that Hamlet has had his way with you, and then who's going to want to marry you? Because that's also her. So she has to think about consequences here as well. If he's not a match for her, she cannot be seen in public with him, basically. So as far he may say he loves you, can he marry you? Is this even possible? Remember, it's not his choice alone. It will have to suit the state. Anyway, her response, I shall the effect of this good lesson keep, as watchman to my heart. But good my brother, do not, as some ungracious pastors do, show me the steep and thorny way to heaven, whiles, like a puffed and reckless libertine, himself the primrose path of dalliance treads, and reeks not his own reed. So, don't be like a pastor that tells me to be virtuous and chaste, and then you go abroad and do the opposite. A little tit for tat. It's fine for you to say, okay, you tell me to be like this, and you make sure you're going to France. You watch yourself, right? Anyway, so it's funny, and you can imagine a brother and sister speaking like this then, right? I mean, maybe not this verse, but the sentiments. Enter Polonius. And then Ophelia, Laertes, fear me not. Enter Polonius. I stay too long, but here my father comes. A double blessing is a double grace. Occasion smiles upon a second leave. Yet here, Laertes, abroad, for shame, the wind sits in the shoulder of your sail, and you are stayed for. There, laying his hand on his head, my blessing with thee. And these few precepts in thy memory, nor any unproportioned thought this act. So now, and look thou character. Okay. And now it gives this advice. Now, Polonius is a counselor. He's a wise counselor. is his counsel here, which seems wise, just wise counsel, or are we supposed to see it as somewhat humorous? I think there's an element of humor to it. Polonius has been told he's a wise counselor, and so he values his own wisdom. He's a little bit of a puffed up guy. He's proud like a peacock. So here's his advice. Give thy thoughts no tongue, nor any unproportioned thought his act. Be thou familiar, but by no means vulgar. Those friends thou hast, and their adoption tried, grapple them unto thy soul with hoops of steel. But do not dull thy palm with entertainment of each new-hatched, unfledged courage. Beware of entrance to a quarrel, but being in, bear it that the opposed may beware of thee. Give every man thy ear, but few thy voice. Take each man's censure, but reserve thy judgment. Costly thy habit as thy purse can buy, but not expressed in fancy, rich, not gaudy, for the apparel oft proclaims the man. And they in France of the best rank and station are of a most select and generous chief in that. Neither a borrower nor a lender be, for loan oft loses it both itself and friend, and borrowing dulleth the edge of husbandry. This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day, that thou canst not then be false to any man. Farewell, my blessing season this in thee. So I think there's a little bit of pomp or a little bit of pride in Polonius, but this is all very wise counsel. So what we have here is a noble counselor in his character, in his sentiment, in his wisdom, and this is his family. So we have Hamlet and his family, and they're totally messed up. And now we have those that are dependent on them. And if you want to see a parallel, Kent is a little bit like Polonius. I mean, I think there are differences between them, but there's also similarities. This is a wise old man that the king leans on for counsel, and this is his family. Kent didn't have a family. Remember, Kent's more or less a bachelor. But here he has a family, and we have a loving and dutiful brother and sister towards one another. So they're a good family. You have to see this at the outset, because then when Ophelia is jilted, there's outrage. And Claudius, who is bent against Hamlet already, can use that, and he will manipulate exactly that, and he will bait Laertes to come after him. So because of his virtue, because he's a good man, he is a useful tool for him, because he will also be effectual. So so I'll just skip over at that, and then Polonius then has a chat with Ophelia, and he wants to know again about Prince Hamlet, and he gives more or less the same advice as Laertes had just had. You know, how much is he? What has he said to you? And how tenderly has he spoken to you, etc., etc. And he's just pressing. Does he do this because he's a father or because the king wants to know? That's unclear. And this is his problem, as in his position, Polonius is not quite it's not quite the case that he has two bodies, but he serves the king, and that is, he owes his station in life to the king's favor, and he has to be obedient to him, and so therefore his duty to his daughter is tempered by his duty to his king. And so there's an element of, he's a politician, and his daughter is a little bit of a pawn in this, and that's part of the challenge here for Ophelia, who's one of Shakespeare's most tragic heroines, is who shall she trust? Who can she trust? Hamlet's a problem for her. Her brother's gone. Polonius is compromised politically. Denmark is a sewer. And what does she do now? What's she left to do? Where can she act? Remember, she's not like a man. She can't be sent away from the court. She has to stay there. And she has no, what is she to do? What I'm saying at the outset here, she's going to go mad. How do we see the roots of that in her situation in life? Because I think Shakespeare makes it plausible that should happen. But scene 4, I'll skip over the scene of Hamlet's and 5. It's Hamlet and his father's ghost. And I'll only, just a couple phrases here. When he sees the ghost, Hamlet, Act 1, Scene 4, his response, line 39, angels and ministers of grace, defend us. Be thou a spirit of health or a goblin damned. Bring with thee heirs from heaven or blasts from hell. Be thy intents wicked or charitable. Thou comest in such a questionable shape that I will speak to thee. I'll call thee Hamlet. King, father, royal Dane, oh, answer me, let me not burst in ignorance, but tell me why thy canonized bones, hearsed in death, have burst their cerements, why the sepulchre, wherein we saw thee quietly interned, hath oped his ponderous and marble jaws to cast thee up again. What may this mean, that thou, dead corpse, again in complete steel revisits thus the glimpses of the moon, making night hideous, and we, fools of nature, etc., etc. And then it beckons, little, come with me. And the others say, don't go with it. So again, at the outset, there's no doubt that they all see this phantasm. The nature of the phantasm is what's in question. And it's clear from the response of all that they think that there may be malign intent here. This could be a demon of some sort. They don't see it so much as a ghost, they see something else at work. When they come to speak, now the ghost reveals that he is his father's spirit, scene 5, line 9, doomed for a certain time to walk the night. So it's this disclosure which is going to shackle Hamlet from action. I'll submit to you, I said it at the outset. But doomed for a certain time to walk the night, and for the day confined to fast in fires, till the foul crimes done in my days of nature are burnt and purged away. By that I am forbid to tell the secrets of my prison house. I could a tale unfold whose lightest word would harrow up thy soul, freeze thy young blood, and make thy two eyes like stars start from their spheres, thy knotted and combined locks to part, and each particular hair to stand an end, like quills upon the fearful porpentine. That's a porcupine. A porpentine. They didn't have them in England. You've heard of them in the New World. Right? The reports have come from, there's this creature that has quills that stand upright, and they also will hear that they throw the quills, which they don't. Right? They flick their tail, and if it catches you, fine, but they can't actually throw them. But he calls it a porpentine. Anyway. But this eternal blazon must not be to ears of flesh and blood. List, oh list, if ever didst thou thy father dear love. O God, says Hamlet, revenge his foul and most unnatural murder. Murder! Murder most foul as in the best it is, but this most foul, strange, and unnatural. Haste me to know it, for that I with wings swift as meditation or the thoughts of love may sweep to my revenge. So he's ready. He's all ready to act. He's angry, upset, and he says, I find thee apt, and duller shouldst thou be than the fat weed that roots itself in ease on Lethe wharf. Wouldst thou not stir in this? Now, Hamlet, here, 'tis given out that sleeping in my orchard a serpent stung me. So the whole ear of Denmark is by a forged process of my death rankly abused. But know, thou noble youth, the serpent that did sting thy father's life now wears his crown. O my prophetic soul, my uncle, I, that incestuous, that adulterate beast, with witchcraft of his wits, with traitorous gifts, O wicked wit and gifts that have the power so to seduce, one to his shameful lust, the will of my most seeming virtuous queen. O Hamlet, once again playing on the seeming. Now the father, the dead father, who's a tormented soul, is questioning the virtue of his wife. O Hamlet, what a falling off was there from me. from me, whose love was of that dignity that it went hand in hand even with the vow I made to her in marriage, and to decline upon a wretch whose natural gifts were poor to those of mine, but virtue as it never will be moved, though lewdness courted in a shape of heaven, so lust, though to a radiant angel linked, will sate itself in a celestial bed and prey on garbage. But soft methinks I scent the morning air, brief let me be. Sleeping within my orchard, once again, my custom always of the afternoon, upon my secure hour, thy uncle stole, with juice of cursed Hebona in a vial, it's a poison. And in the porches of my ear did pour the leprous distilment, whose effect holds such an enmity with blood of man, that swift as quicksilver it courses through the natural gates and alleys of the body, and with a sudden vigor it doth posset and curd like eager droppings into milk, the thin and wholesome blood. So did it mine. And a most instant tetter barked about most lazar-like, with vile and loathsome crust all my smooth body. Thus was I, sleeping by a brother's hand of life, of crown, of queen, at once dispatched, cut off even in the blossoms of my sin, unhouselled, disappointed, unannaled, no reckoning made, but sent to my account with all my imperfections on my head. O horrible, most horrible, if thou hast nature in thee, bear it not. Let not the royal bed of Denmark be a couch for luxury and damned incest. But howsoever thou pursues this act, taint not thy mind, nor let thy soul contrive against thy mother aught. Leave her to heaven, and to those thorns that in her bosom lodge to prick and sting her. Fare thee well at once. And he must go off. Okay. So all sorts of things being said here. And note the analogies again. The ear is a porch for the soul. So again, the metaphor of the body as a temple there. And there's the porch of the ear, and it goes in and goes through the alleyways and so forth. These metaphors are used regularly in Renaissance thinking. And it's the microcosm, macrocosm stuff that goes all the way back to pre-Socratic philosophy. And the idea that everything is comprised of four elements, and that there's a picture in the individual soul that mirrors that of the cosmos as a whole. Plato's Republic is based on that, right? He wants to know what justice is for an individual. He says, well, it's hard to describe that on an individual scale. Let's talk about how it is in the state. And then I'll demonstrate what it means to be a just man. Here's how you do it there. But really he's talking about justice internally, and this is the view of Plato. That your reason has to rule over your passions. That's it. Your reason ought to. And his critique, Plato's, is that the poets appeal to the passions and they don't even know what's going on. And so they're disordered, and it leads to anarchy, and it leads to misrule. Anyway, but he hears this, and the issue here is that he has just described purgatory. He's in a state of purgatory. And furthermore, he won't get out of there. He says purgatory. It might even be a hell. This is the problem. Because he's gone there without being confessed. He has not confessed his sins. He's gone there a sinner. And therefore he is burning for those sins. Speaking that the father speaking as if he were a Catholic, by the way. This is interesting. Acknowledging a purgatory. Now, I don't know what his father was like there. In the Reformation period, Denmark would have been eventually brought in, would have been Lutheran. It is to this day. The official church in Denmark is the Lutheran church. And they would dispute the doctrine of purgatory in Denmark. But when is this set? I don't know exactly. It's unclear when the setting is to be, but the suggestion of Wittenberg pulls it forward. It is a medieval Christian university, but in Hamlet, it sounds like Hamlet and Horatio both question this idea that there can be a figure like this coming up and speaking, and certainly describing a purgatory in which his sins are punished, or maybe it's hell, but I think it's a purgatory. Yes?
Would this be considered ordered or disordered speech? Because in it there's a lot of...
It's ordered.
there's like a lot of tropes and things like that.
Yes, and there's a lot of disruptions within it, but these just reflect his distress and the chaos that's brought within it. But in general, it's an orderly speech, right? It's written in verse. It's just there are regular disruptions from that. So there's regular, in terms of the punctuation, you can see that it's paused all over the place. So yes, there are lots of figures of disruption within the verse, but in general, it's still an orderly speech. It's a king speaking. His mind has not been overthrown. So it's to be trusted in that sense. It appears like a reasonable case that's being made. But then Hamlet's response after the father just goes away, and he goes away before the sun comes up, because as soon as the light comes up, he can't be on the earth. So what's going on there? And Hamlet's thinking, okay, I hear this, and I hear what I already suspected, and I said I would act, but now I'm not going to act. Why? Here's the speech. Oh, all you host of heaven. O earth, what else? And shall I couple hell? To couple is to be united with, right? To be married to it. This is my allegiance. Oh, fie, hold my heart, and you, my sinews, grow not instant old, but bear me stiffly up. Remember thee, thinking back to what his father had just said, I, thou poor ghost, whilst memory holds a seat in this distracted globe. Remember thee, yea, from the table of my memory I'll wipe away all trivial fond records, all saws of books, all forms, all pressures past, that youth and observation copied there. And thy commandments all alone shall live within the book and volume of my brain, unmixed with baser matter. Yes, by heaven, O most pernicious woman, O villain, smiling damned villain, my tables, meet it is I set it down that one may smile and smile and smile and be a villain. At least I am sure it may be so in Denmark. And then he starts writing. So, uncle, there you are. Now to my word. It is adieu, adieu, remember me. I have sworn it. And then he comes, and then Horatio comes rushing in and tells him something of what he said. They exchange a few words, and Horatio says, Hamlet says, I'm sorry that they offend you. And Horatio says, there's no offense, my lord. And Hamlet's response, yes, by St. Patrick, but there is, Horatio. And much offense, too, touching this vision here. It is an honest ghost, that let me tell you. For your desire to know what is between us, or mastered as you may, and know, good friends, as you are friends, scholars and soldiers, give me one poor request. What is it, my lord? We will. Never make known what you have seen tonight. And they all say, my lord, we will not. Nay, but swear it. In faith, my lord, not I, says Horatio. Marcellus, nor I, my lord, in faith, upon my sword. We have sworn, my lord, already. Indeed, upon my sword, indeed. And now the ghost cries under the stage, swear. I was just straight, like, what's going on here? It's a voice from hell? What sort of compact is this? Right? He himself, shall I couple hell? And he hears a voice from below the earth swearing upon his sword. Like, what's going on here? That there's and reason here, but okay. And then they all swear, and then the scene concludes, rest, perturbed spirits, so, gentlemen, with all my love I do commend me to you. And what so poor a man as Hamlet is, may do it, express his love and friending to you. God willing shall not lack. Let us go in together and still your fingers on your lips. I pray, the time is out of joint. O cursed spite that ever I was born to set it right. Nay, come, let us go together. So, rhyming couplet, resolution. I know what I'm going to do. He's upset. He may be distraught. The time is out of joint. Oh, cursed sprite that ever I was born to set it right. But there's a resolution there, a tight. It's not just verse, it's rhyme. memorable line for the audience who's listening to Hamlet speak. It jumps out at you when a character speaks in rhyme. You remember the line. And so there's a sense, oh, he's made a decision. Now he's going to act. Okay, Act 2, Scene 1. Polonius there speaking to a servant here, and now Ophelia comes in. And Ophelia will recount her encounter with Lord Hamlet. Now, we've just been given something of the nature of their relationship up to this point. It's not even clear exactly, although she tells her father, there's tokens of affection and so forth, but it hasn't gone beyond that. So I think we're to take her word. We don't know any better. I don't think she's lying to her father. And I don't think that she's disingenuous with her brother either. So he has expressed his love for her. But that's it. That's the extent of it. And there are little tokens as a courtly lover to be, I'll give you a clipping of my hair or whatever. Who knows what. But that's it. But Ophelia comes in, and Polonius, how now, Ophelia? What's the matter? Oh, my lord, I have been so affrighted, line 73. With what in the name of God? My lord, as I was sewing in my closet. Lord Hamlet, with his doublet, all unbraced. No hat upon his head, his stockings fouled, ungartered, and down jive to the ankle. So he's dressed, but he hasn't done up his doublet yet, and his socks, they're held up by garters. They don't have an elastic in them, right? So they fall down to his ankles. Down jive to his ankle, pale as his shirt, his knees knocking each other, and with a look so piteous in purport as if he had been loosed out of hell to speak of horrors. He comes before me. Mad for thy love? My lord, I do not know, but truly I do fear it. What said he? He took me by the wrist and held me hard. Then goes he to the length of all this arm, and with the other thus o'er his brow. He falls to such perusal of my face as would draw it. Long stayed he so. At last, a little shaking of my arm, and thrice, his head thus waving up and down, he raised a sigh so piteous and profound as it had seemed to shatter all his bulk and end his being. That done, he lets me go, and with his head o'er his shoulder turned, he seemed to find his way without his eyes. For out of doors he went without their helps, and to the last bended their light on me. So he's looking at her as he goes out, as if he loves her. Come, go with me. I will go see the king. This is the very ecstasy of love, whose violent property foredoes itself and leads the will to desperate undertakings. So the passions are leading the will, and bad things can only result. He's going to tell the king, because of course the king, this is a political affair now. I have to tell the king. As doth any passions under heaven that does afflict our natures. I am sorry. What, have you given him any hard words of late? No, my good lord. But as you did command, I did repel his letters, and denied his access to me. That hath made him mad. I am sorry with the better heed and judgment I had not coated him. I feared he did but trifle, and meant to rack thee. But beshrew my jealousy. By heaven, it is as proper to our age to cast beyond themselves in our opinions, and as it is common for the younger sort to lack discretion. Come, go we to the king. This must be known, which, being kept close, might move more grief to hide than hate to utter love. Come. And now they go out. Okay. He thought, just as Horatio did, and they gave the same counsel, he's not really serious about you. Don't, so just push him away from you. And it's made him, his conclusion is this has driven Hamlet mad, because he was full of passion for you, and now he wants to lose it. He's lost his mind. Okay, scene 2. King and queen. And now we have the two characters, the sort of infamous clownish character, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. And by the way, we've seen Tom Stoppard's play, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. You must see it if you haven't seen it. So these marginal character. Are dead. Tom Stoppard, one of the great modern playwrights. I firmly recommend his work to you. So this one is basically a takeoff on Hamlet. The sub-characters there, really interesting. He also writes a play called Arcadia. And you will also know him, no, that's a different play. But Arcadia. So it's very much in the setting of the Renaissance period, but he's a contemporary playwright, British playwright, really good. And it's a funny play, but it's about time, and it's actually quite a contemplative landscape there. But the king comes in. Welcome, dear Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Moreover, that we much did long to see you, the need we have to use you did provoke our hasty sending. Something have you heard of Hamlet's transformation, so call it. So now we have two more young men. So we've got Fortinbras, we have Hamlet, we have Horatio, we have Laertes, we have Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and actually we just had Marcellus and others. So we have a lot of young men, contemporaries so these are teenagers, right? Pose them in. You've heard of Hamlet's transformation, so call it. Sith not the exterior nor the inward man resembles that it was what it should be. So there's been a passing of time between the first act and the second act. And Hamlet has been acting like he is mad. We know not why. We know that he's resolved to do something, and he's acting as if he had lost his mind. We'll come to hear from his own mouth why this is. But at this point, all we know is that he has acted in this way, and here's the response to it. But he resembles what it should be more than his father's death, that thus hath put him so much from the understanding of himself, I cannot dream of. The king's lying. He has strong suspicions that Hamlet, because remember, he's come to his rule illegitimately, and so he fears everything. Right? So this is the consequence of injustice and iniquity, is that you trust no order, because you violated that order yourself. You are insecure in your rule and in your life. You trust nothing, and he doesn't trust him. He in particular doesn't trust Hamlet. He said, I can't dream of it. Polonius thinks that it's because his daughter has jilted him and he was mad with love. That's not what the king thinks. He's more suspicious. I entreat you both that being of so young days brought up with him. See, they're his childhood friends. And sith so neighboured to his youth and behaviour, that you vouchsafe your rest here in our court some little time. So by your companies to draw him on to pleasures, and to gather so much as from occasion you may glean. Whether aught to us unknown afflicts him thus, that open lies within our remedy. So the auspices of this is you're his old friends and I want to help him, and there's something wrong here, and you get to the bottom of it, and then I'll see if I can help him. Not knowing that he's a villain, but he's going to use his friends against him. So now we have a political intrigue. And this is interesting. It's like a game of chess. We've got two men who are orchestrating this, and so there's a figure and a dramaturge figure. They're both dramaturge figures, in fact, and both are trying to arrange other actors against the other in a game of sorts. I say the father, Claudius here, or the king, could, of course, just do away with him, but then he would lose his mother's affections, and he doesn't want that. So he has to find some other way to get him. Hamlet, likewise, he has no power, so he has to do it through other means, and he also has to act. King Claudius acts like a caring father. Hamlet acts like a mad son. But they're both acting. And while acting, they're also orchestrating. So a dramaturge figure, by the way, is a surrogate for the playwright. So they're like the playwright orchestrating the other players and directing them to do what they want them to do on the stage. The problem with that, as we've seen throughout Shakespeare's plays, is sometimes characters don't do what you told them to do. And then you got to clean up their mess. But here we go. Good gentlemen, says the queen, he hath much talked of you. And sure I am, two men there is not living to whom he more adheres. If it will please you, to show us so much gentry and goodwill as to expend your time with us a while. For the supply and profit of our hope, your visitation shall receive such thanks as fits a king's remembrance. Both your majesties might, by the sovereign power you have of us, put your dread pleasures more into command than to entreaty. Guildenstern, but we both obey, and here give us ourselves in the full bent, to lay our service freely at your feet, to be commanded. Thanks, Rosencrantz and gentle Guildenstern. Thanks, Guildenstern and gentle Rosencrantz. So really funny names to the English speakers as well, and a bit comical, and later on their names get confused and flipped around. And this is two kids, anyway. I beseech you instantly to visit, and off he goes. So they come in, Polonius enters, tells something of what has transpired, and tells that the ambassadors of Norway have returned. Now, again, the intrigue about Fortinbras still pressing on them. It seems marginal to the plot, and it is marginal until the very end, but it's really it surrounds the whole play, and it's what drives the plot. The ambassadors from Norway, my lord, have joyfully returned. Thou hast still been the father of good news. Have I, my lord? I assure my good liege, I hold my duty as I hold my soul, both to my God and to my gracious king. And I do think, or else this brain of mine hunts not the trail of policy so sure as it hath used to do, that I have found the very cause of Hamlet's lunacy. Oh, speak of that. That do I long to hear. Give first admittance to the ambassadors. My news shall be the fruit to that great feast. Okay, so they come in and they speak to him, and Voltaman gives his account here, and the account of the Polak. I'll read it. I think I have to read it because it's germane to the sort of the whole plot here. Voltaman, most fair return of greetings and desires upon our first. He sent us to suppress his nephew's levies, which to him appeared to be a preparation against the Polak. But better looked into, he truly found it was against your highness. Whereat grieved, that so his sickness, age, and impotence was falsely borne in hand, sends out arrests on Fortinbras, which he in brief obeys, receives rebuke from Norway, and in fine makes vow before his uncle never more to give the assay of arms against your majesty. Whereof old Norway, overcome with joy, gives him 3,000 crowns an annual fee, and his commission to employ those soldiers so levied as before against the Polak, with an entreaty herein further shown. He gives him the treaty. So they have a treaty between the two, between Denmark and Norway. He's not going to attack you. He's going to attack the Polak, the Poles. So up in Norway, they're going to go over and attack Poland rather than Denmark. So don't you worry, it's all resolved. No problem. There we go. Polonius comes in and he explains the cause of the Hamlet's madness, and he thinks that, and he gives reported speech of what he, and even reads the letter which he gave to Ophelia, and I'll just read these lines, and then I think we may have to close in a second here. But here's the lines from the letter that Hamlet gave to Ophelia. Doubt thou the stars are fire, doubt that the sun doth move, doubt truth to be a liar, but never doubt I love. Oh dear Ophelia, I am ill at these numbers. In other words, he's a crappy poet. I'm ill at these numbers. He doesn't, the meter's off. I'm ill at these numbers. I have not art to reckon my groans, but that I love thee. This is Hamlet expressing that he's not a good poet. It's not Ophelia. It's not Polonius's speech. It's Hamlet's own assessment of his own ability as a poet. I'm ill at these numbers. I have not art to suppress my groans, but that I love thee best, O most best, believe it. Adieu. Thine evermore, most dear lady, whilst this machine is to him, Hamlet. Fold the letter up. This in obedience hath my daughter shown me, and more above hath his solicitings as they fell out by time, by means, and place, all given to mine ear. But how hath she received his love? What do you think of me? as of a man faithful and honorable. I would fain prove so. But what might you think when I had seen this hot love on the wing, as I perceived it, I must tell you that, before my daughter told me, what might you, or my dear majesty, your queen here, think, if I had played the desk, or table book, or given my heart a winking, mute and dumb, or looked upon this love with idle sight, what might you think? No, I went round to work, as my young mistress, thus I did bespeak. Lord Hamlet is a prince out of thy star. This must not be. And then I prescripts gave her that she should lock herself from his resort, admit no messengers, receive no tokens, which done, she took the fruits of my advice, and he, repelled a short tale to make, fell into a sadness, then into a fast, thence to a watch, thence into a weakness, thence to a lightness, and by this declension into the madness wherein now he raves and all we mourn for. Do you think 'tis this? The Queen. It may, very like. Hath there been such a time, I would fain know that I have positively said 'tis so, when it proved otherwise? Not that I know. And then Polonius points to his head and shoulder. Take this from this, if this be otherwise. If circumstances lead me, I will find where truth is hid, though it were hid indeed within the center. And how may we try it further? You know, sometimes he walks for it. So he's going to test him. Hamlet comes upon his mother, and I think I'll have to leave it off at that in Act 2, Scene 2, and we will pick it up there. But we're about to, and we'll pick up next time with the players that enter the stage. Now, so that's where we'll pick it up, with the important play within the play. Now, I said that there is the external Fortinbras on the outside, and then there's the whole play in which Hamlet is trying to orchestrate his vengeance. But within all of that, the means by which he does is this play to catch the conscience of the king. So it's a significant section. We'll focus on that at the outset of next class, okay? I'll see you then.